Hello everyone, and welcome to a brief video. I wanted to talk about Mars stationing retrograde in Leo today. So for those of you who may have been following along with the weekly astro forecasts, or who have been watching some of the astrology news that Christy and I have been talking about on the Conversations with Christy YouTube channel, you may already know some of this. So Mars has been moving incredibly slowly. It has still been moving forward in the zodiac, but it has been getting increasingly slower and slower and slower. And today, Friday, December 6th, it is actually going to turn around and start moving retrograde. Mars retrogrades happen less frequently than any of the other planetary retrogrades, so they happen about once every 2 years. And they last a long time when they do happen, and that has to do with Mars is actually physically closer to us than most of the other planets. And so with Mars moving retrograde, it typically takes a couple months where it's in its shadow period, the period through of the zodiac it's going to retrograde back through. It spends a couple months slowing down, then a couple months retrograding and going backwards, then a couple more months going forwards in the zodiac, getting past its shadow period and moving into new zodiac ground. So typically the Mars retrogrades, they are a 5 to 6 month ordeal. What's particularly interesting this time is as Mars is going through this process, it is opposing Pluto, which recently moved into Aquarius several weeks ago. So right now we have Mars, which will be stationing retrograde at 6 degrees of Leo, and then it's going to start moving backward, and it's at 6 degrees of Leo. Pluto is at 0 degrees of Aquarius, and it's going to move right back over and oppose Pluto exactly at 0 degrees of Aquarius. This is the second of 3 Mars-Pluto oppositions. We got the first one when Mars came and opposed Pluto moving forward. Now Mars is moving backward. We're going to get another opposition. Then Mars is going to keep moving backward, come forward again, and we will get the third opposition. So this is going to bring back some themes from earlier this fall. Mars retrograde in Leo. There's a lot to explore there around our relationship to ourselves, our relationship to our own personal power, areas where we may have been giving up authenticity, personal power. This is all extra true because in the next few days, Venus is moving through the final degrees of Capricorn, is going to be conjoining, moving on top of Pluto, and then moving past Pluto to oppose Mars. So Mars, over this next couple of weeks, is going to be opposing first Venus and then Pluto. And Venus is all about relationships, the ways that we interact with others. Pluto is about power and power dynamics, power struggles. And if we think about Leo, Leo is so much about authenticity, stepping into our own inner lion. And so we have kind of this push and pull between how much are we willing to compromise to be in various relationships of various types with various people, and how much are we not willing to compromise? Maybe there are some relationships we need to be more deliberate about. Maybe we limit time with certain people or only interact with them in certain environments because they are sort of encouraging us to give away our personal power. And then with Pluto there in that opposition, as well as Venus, Venus-Pluto is always about relationship power dynamics. And so there is this sense of who has more power, who sort of has the upper hand in the various relationships in our lives. And we will have more awareness of that than ever over this next week. So this is a good time to really think about who we are, who we want to be, who we would be in the absence of any other connections, relationships, interactions with others. And make sure that that balance is where we want it to be. always, when we are in a relationship of any kind with other people, there are some compromises. Maybe we don't leave our dirty socks on the floor because a partner doesn't like that. Maybe we never go to see horror movies because our friend doesn't like seeing horror movies. So there are always some compromises to what we want and our authenticity. And we make those compromises to be in relationships with other humans, which is amazing. None of us want to live a completely isolated life. We want those interconnections. But figuring out how much of a compromise we can make while still living out our authentic self, that's tricky. And that is so much about, especially what these next couple of weeks of the Mars retrograde are going to be about, as it moves to oppose first Venus in Aquarius, then Pluto in Aquarius. What do these power dynamics look like? How much are we compromising of ourselves? And then the flip side of that is we may find that we are preventing other people from living their most authentic lives. There may be ways we realize we are holding people back. So in some cases, in some relationships, we may be held back. In other relationships, we may be the one, even unintentionally, holding others back. So kind of sitting with some of those ideas as we approach this Mars retrograde. And then as Mars retrogrades, it's going to move through Leo, the 6 degrees of Leo there, but most of its retrograde is actually going to be after it moves out of Leo and back into Cancer. Mars is considered to be in its detriment in Cancer. It's not very strong in Cancer. It's in its fall. Mars is exalted in Capricorn, which is the opposite sign of Cancer. That doesn't mean that Mars in Cancer is bad or worse, but it means it's trickier for it to point itself in a good direction. Mars is very potent in Cancer, but it has this energy of wanting to protect the self and the family and the home kind of above all else. It's kind of that mama bear energy of don't get between the mama bear and her cubs. She may be pretty ferocious. It's that type of energy where we may all be feeling extra defensive, maybe even, seeing threats that aren't there. For example, if you happen to get between a mama bear and her cubs, you probably are not trying to hurt the cubs. You probably just wandered into that place and are in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the mama bear is probably going to assume that you are after her cubs. And so there is this sense of it's important over this next few months as Mars is retrograde, first in Leo and then moving back into Cancer, being careful not to overreact, not to assume bad intentions and feel like we need to rush in and defend ourselves, defend the people we care about. Protectiveness is a really good quality, but defensiveness is not such a great quality. So really thinking about how we can protect and care for ourselves and those around us without that turning into defensive knee-jerk reactions. And whenever any of the planets are retrograde, there's a sense of the importance of reflecting and looking back. So in this next few weeks, as Mars first begins to move retrograde, so much of that will be reflecting on relationships, power dynamics with all of the various people in our life and evaluating how we feel about those dynamics and if there are any changes we want to make. Mars retrograde is usually not a good time for making changes. Things tend to move very slowly and get detoured and sidetracked during Mars retrogrades. And right now Mercury is also retrograde too, further not helping things move forward. But it is a wonderful time to strategize. Look back on relationships, reflect on what could change, and start formulating a plan. If there are changes you want to make to relationships, or time maybe you want to limit with certain individuals, or maybe there are individuals where you get a lot of energy from them and you want to actively seek them out more and spend more time with them. So just kind of evaluating relationships over these next several weeks. Then as Mars moves into Cancer, evaluating areas where we may feel more protective than we should. And we may see things too much through the lens of self and other, and like, I'm going to protect myself. You are probably out to get me. You are probably out to get those I love. There's going to be a feel of that, but it's likely not reality. So by the time we hit January, really starting to look deeply within ourselves, resist those first impulses of maybe defensiveness and frustration, and instead working to understand the perspective of the other people. And yeah, so I think this is a really interesting Mars retrograde because it does go through two signs. So we're kind of getting the retrograde Mars in Leo flavor, followed by the retrograde Mars in Cancer flavor. But both of these are extremely productive. Again, if we can use this retrograde time to look back, reflect, strategize on the changes we want to make to our relationships, the ways we interact with others in the future. I hope everyone enjoys our first day of Mars retrograde in Leo today, and have a wonderful weekend.